The first thing Admiral Kiera Valdez noticed when her fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Concord Station Apex was how quiet the comms became. Every alien channel, every diplomatic frequency, every military band went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then the chatter exploded. She could not understand most of it, but she did not need to. She had seen the same reaction her entire career. It was the sound of people trying not to laugh. The year was 2387. Humanity had joined the Galactic Concord only 40 years ago, making them the youngest species in an alliance of over 200 spacefaring civilizations. The Concord had existed for thousands of years. Its members had mapped entire galaxies, built cities inside stars, and developed weapons that could turn planets into glass. And now, pulling into their most important military station, came 40 human warships that looked like they had been welded together in a junkyard. They had not been, of course. The ships of the first expeditionary fleet were the finest machines Earth had ever produced. At the front of the formation flew the dreadnought UES Mjolnir, a brutal slab of dark metal almost 2 kilometers long. It had no smooth curves, no glowing energy arrays, no elegant lines. It looked like a fist made of iron. And running along its spine, from bow to stern, was the largest electromagnetic railgun ever built by human hands. That was the problem. Every other species in the galaxy fought with energy weapons. Plasma lances that could burn through hull plating at 1,000,000 degrees. Particle beams that could cut a frigate in half from across a solar system. Elegant, powerful, advanced. And every ship in the galaxy carried energy shields designed to absorb and scatter exactly those kinds of attacks. It was the way war had been fought for 10,000 years. Humanity had showed up with guns that threw metal very fast. The diplomatic reception that evening was held in the Grand Gallery of Concord Station Apex, a room so large it had its own weather system. Clouds drifted between pillars of living crystal, and the floor was a single sheet of transparent diamond looking down on the nebula below. Hundreds of alien diplomats and military officers filled the space. The Velthari were there in their flowing silver robes, tall and thin, their 4 eyes glowing with quiet superiority. They were an elder race, one of the founders of the Concord, and they had never let anyone forget it. The Kareth were there too, insectoid warriors, standing 7 feet tall in chitin armor that was part of their own bodies, their mandibles clicking as they watched the humans with cold interest. Admiral Valdez walked through the crowd in her black dress uniform, her dark hair pulled back tight, her expression calm. She was 52 years old, born on a mining colony orbiting Jupiter, and she had not smiled at a diplomat in over a decade. She did not plan to start now. The Veltari High Admiral, Sarath Cole, approached her first. He was ancient even by Veltari standards, his silver skin marked with the ceremonial scars of 100 campaigns. He looked down at Valdez with all 4 of his eyes, and spoke through his translator device. Admiral Valdez, welcome to Apex. We have reviewed the specifications of your fleet with great interest. He paused. Your ships carry no energy weapons at all, only kinetic accelerators. Is this correct? Railguns, Valdez said. Yes. Fascinating. Sarath Cole's tone made it clear he did not find it fascinating at all. My people abandoned kinetic weapons 6,000 years ago. We found them to be limited. I understand, Valdez said. I mean no offense, the High Admiral continued, and Valdez knew that when someone said that, they absolutely meant offense. But your weapons are by galactic standards quite primitive, throwing metal at a target. It is what species do before they discover real physics. We are aware of how the galaxy sees us, Valdez said. The Veltari Admiral leaned closer. Then why do you persist? Valdez looked him directly in his 4 eyes. Because it works. The joint military exercises began 2 days later. 12 species participated, running simulated engagements and live fire tests on decommissioned target ships. The human fleet was scheduled last, almost as an afterthought. The alien admirals gathered on the observation deck of Station Apex to watch, most of them treating it as entertainment rather than a serious demonstration. The target was a decommissioned Veltari heavy cruiser, a ship that had served in 3 wars and still carried its full shield array. The shields were set to maximum power. By galactic standards, this was a tough target. Plasma lances would need sustained fire to burn through those shields. Particle beams would need precise targeting to find weak points. It was the kind of test that separated good navies from great ones. The Mjolnir turned slowly until its main gun was pointed at the target. Inside the dreadnought, the railgun began to charge. Massive capacitor banks, each one the size of a house, dumped their energy into the electromagnetic accelerator rails. The slug sat in the breach, a solid rod of tungsten carbide alloy, 2 meters long, and dense enough that a piece the size of a fist weighed as much as a ground car. Valdez gave the order. The Mjolnir fired. There was no beam of light, no flash of plasma. There was a deep, heavy sound that resonated through the hull of every ship in the area, a sound that was felt more than heard, like the heartbeat of something enormous. And then silence. The slug moved so fast it outran its own shockwave. It crossed the distance to the target in less than a blink. It hit the Veltari cruiser's shields and did not slow down. The energy shields were designed to absorb heat, to scatter photons, to dissipate the fury of plasma and particle weapons. They were brilliant technology, but they had one flaw that no one in the galaxy had ever bothered to address, because no one in the galaxy still used kinetic weapons. Energy shields could not stop a physical object moving at 8% of the speed of light. The tungsten slug punched through the forward shields, through the bow armor, through the forward crew compartments, through the reactor housing, through the engineering section, through the aft armor, through the rear shields, and out the other side. It left behind a tunnel of molten metal and superheated gas that ran the entire length of the ship. The cruiser did not explode. It simply died, gutted from front to back in a single instant. On the observation deck, 200 alien officers stood in complete silence. No one was laughing anymore. The Veltari admiral standing next to Sareth Cole whispered something. He stared at the ruined cruiser, at the perfect hole punched through its ancient hull. And he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt afraid. That night, alone in his quarters, Sareth Cole opened a secure channel to Veltari Intelligence Command. His orders were simple. Find out everything about human weapons development, everything about their railgun technology, everything about their military doctrine, and do it quietly, because the last thing the galaxy needed was to panic. But as Cole ended the transmission and stared out at the stars, he knew it was already too late for quiet. The humans had just shown the galaxy something it was not ready to see. They had shown that 10,000 years of energy weapon development, 10,000 years of shield technology, 10,000 years of military doctrine could be defeated by a simple piece of metal moving very, very fast. And the rock had gone through everything. 6 months after the demonstration at Concord Station Apex, the galaxy had mostly gone back to ignoring humanity. The alien news networks ran the railgun footage for a few weeks. Experts debated it on discussion panels, and then everyone moved on. One impressive shot did not change 10,000 years of thinking. Most species decided it was a trick, or a fluke, or at best an interesting curiosity that would never matter in a real battle. The people of Elysium 4 did not care about any of that. They were farmers. Elysium 4 was a green and gentle world on the edge of human space. close to the lawless region called the Shattered Reach. 800,000 people lived there, growing crops that fed a dozen colony worlds. They had 2 small frigates for defense, and a ground militia made up of farmers who trained on weekends. It was not a military target. It was just home. The Dracoon Ravagers came on a Tuesday morning, local time. 300 warships dropped out of hyperspace above Elysium 4 like a cloud of metal locusts. The Dracoon were not a single species, but a coalition of pirates, slavers, and warlords who had operated out of the Shattered Reach for 800 years. They raided Concord colonies for slaves, resources, and sport. The Concord had tried to stop them many times and failed every time. Their home fortress, a place called Iron Heaven, had never been breached. The Dracoon feared nothing. The 2 human frigates, the UES Steadfast and the UES Defiant, moved to intercept. Their captains knew they were going to die. They moved to intercept anyway, buying time for the colony to send a distress signal. The Steadfast was destroyed in the first 3 minutes. The Defiant lasted 7, taking down 2 Ravager ships before a plasma lance cut it in half. The distress signal went out in all directions. It reached the Veltari Regional Defense Fleet first. Admiral Sereth Cole received it, read it, and called a meeting with his staff. They discussed protocols, they reviewed treaties, they debated jurisdictional responsibilities. They sent a message to the Concord Senate requesting authorization for military action. The process would take, at minimum, 72 hours. The signal reached Admiral Kiera Valdez 40 minutes later. She was stationed 2 systems away with 40 ships of the First Fleet, including the Mjolnir and its sister dreadnought, the UES Gungnir. She read the distress signal once. She read it again. Then she stood up from her command chair and spoke 4 words to her navigation officer. Plot a jump. Now. Her executive officer, Commander Torres, pulled up the tactical data. 300 enemy ships against their 40. Nearly 8-to-1 odds. The Dracoon were experienced fighters with heavy shields and plasma weapons. A cautious commander would wait for reinforcements. A smart commander would coordinate with the Concord fleet. A sane commander would not jump into those odds at all. Valdez was not interested in being cautious, smart, or sane. She was interested in the 800,000 people on Elysium 4, who had about 6 hours before the Dracoon started loading them onto slave ships. All ships, battle stations, she said over the fleet channel. We jump in 15 minutes. Railguns hot on arrival. We are not waiting. We are not negotiating. We are going in fast, and we are going in hard. Commander Torres looked at her. Admiral, for the record, I want to note that we are significantly outnumbered. Valdez almost smiled. We have velocity. The First Fleet jumped. They arrived in the Elysium system at combat speed, already in an attack formation that human tacticians called the Hammer. The 2 dreadnoughts at the center, the cruisers fanned out on the sides, the frigates running ahead as scouts and targeting platforms. Every railgun in the fleet was charged and ready. The Dracoon fleet was spread out around the planet, ships moving into landing positions to begin the slave raid. They detected the human fleet and reacted exactly the way every galactic species reacted to an incoming attack. They raised their energy shields to full power, formed a defensive line, and prepared to absorb the first volley of plasma fire before counterattacking. They did not receive plasma fire. The Mjolnir fired first. Its main railgun sent a tungsten slug across the void at 8% of the speed of light. It hit the largest Dracoon warship in the center of the defensive line. The slug went through the shields without resistance, entered the ship through the forward hull, and exited through the engine section. The ship broke apart along the wound, spilling fire and debris into space. Then the rest of the fleet fired. 40 human ships launched a coordinated salvo. Over 200 railgun rounds crossed the gap between the fleets in less than 2 seconds. The Dracoon front line, 40 ships strong, simply ceased to exist. Some were punched through like the first. Others were hit by multiple slugs and came apart in pieces. A few took glancing hits that tore off sections of hull and sent them spinning into their neighbors. In 4 seconds, the Dracoon lost 40 ships and had not fired a single shot in return. The Ravager commanders were experienced pirates. They had fought the Concorde many times. They knew how battles worked. Energy weapons hit shields. Shields held, or they did not. And the fight went on for hours. That was how it had always worked. This was not how this worked. Panic spread through the Ravager fleet like a disease. Ships that had been moving into attack formation suddenly tried to turn. Captains who had been shouting orders went silent. The Dracoon had never faced an enemy whose weapons ignored their shields completely. They had no doctrine for this. They had no training for this. They had no answer for this. Valdez did not give them time to find one. All ships, advance. Do not let them regroup. Do not let them run. She turned to her weapons officer. Load fragmentation rounds. The fragmentation rounds were new. Earth's weapons engineers had designed them for exactly this kind of battle, when the enemy was clustered and confused. Each round was a standard tungsten slug wrapped in a shell of pre-scored metal. At a set distance from the target, the shell broke apart into thousands of smaller pieces, turning one shot into a cloud of hypersonic shrapnel that covered an area the size of a small city. The human fleet closed the distance and fired again. The fragmentation rounds hit the center of the Dracoon formation and turned it into a tilling field. Ships that were not hit directly were shredded by clouds of metal, moving fast enough to punch through hull plating. Explosions rippled through the Ravager fleet as fuel lines ruptured, reactors breached, and ammunition stores cooked off. The battle lasted 41 minutes from first shot to last. When it was over, 280 Dracoon ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 20 fled into hyperspace, scattering in every direction. The human fleet lost 3 frigates, with 8 other ships taking moderate damage. Elysium 4 was safe. On the surface of the colony, 800,000 people watched the burning debris of the Ravager fleet streak across their sky like falling stars. Many of them cried. Some of them cheered. All of them understood that something had just happened that the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Valdez stood on the bridge of the Mjolnir and looked down at the planet she had just saved. She did not celebrate. She thought about the crews of the 3 frigates she had lost, the men and women who would not go home. She thought about the Steadfast and the Defiant and their brave, doomed crews. She thought about the fact that the Concorde fleet, with its hundreds of ships and thousands of years of experience, had sat in port debating paperwork while her people died. The battle footage was recorded by every ship in the fleet and by the colony's orbital cameras. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds watched a human fleet outnumbered 8-1 tear apart a Dracoon armada like it was made of paper. They watched ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries explode under weapons that the galaxy had called primitive. The footage did not have sound in space, of course, but every ship that had been close enough to the human fleet reported the same thing. Just before the railguns fired, there was a deep vibration that passed through hulls and bones and souls, a low, heavy pulse, like the heartbeat of a god. And then, silence. Perfect, terrible silence, as the slugs crossed the void faster than light could carry their sound. The alien survivors of the battle gave that silence a name. They called it the silence before death. And across the galaxy, for the first time in 10,000 years, species that had never worried about humanity began to worry very much. The Concorde Grand Senate had not held an emergency session in over 300 years. The last one had been about a dying star, threatening to wipe out an entire sector. This time, the emergency was not a star. It was a species. It was humanity. The Senate chamber on the capital world of Aeltheris was a massive dome of white stone and living light, built to hold representatives of all 200 member species. Every seat was filled. The air buzzed with translator devices working overtime as dozens of languages overlapped and competed. In the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed the battle footage from Elysium 4 on a loop. The Dracoon fleet forming up, the human railguns firing, the Ravager ships coming apart, over and over, while 200 species watched and argued about what it meant. The Velthari delegation sat in the highest tier, as they always did. High Admiral Sereth Cole was there, though he was not speaking. He was watching. Below him, the debate had already split into factions, and none of them agreed on anything. The representative from the Uri Federation, a small aquatic species that had been raided by the Dracoon dozens of times, stood and spoke with emotion, shaking his translated voice. He said that humanity had done what the Concord had failed to do for 800 years. He said they had saved a colony while the Velthari fleet sat in port, filling out paperwork. He said that perhaps the galaxy should stop laughing at humans and start learning from them. The representative from the Thessian Compact, a species that shared a border with human space, stood and said the opposite. He said that kinetic weapons of this power were a threat to galactic stability. He said that a species capable of punching through energy shields with simple metal slugs could not be trusted with that power. He proposed immediate sanctions on human shipyards and a ban on railgun technology. Captain Darius Cole sat in the human delegation section and listened to all of it. He was 38, tall and dark-skinned, with the quiet eyes of a man who spent more time watching than talking. Officially, he was a naval attaché assigned to the Concord. Unofficially, he was one of Earth's best intelligence officers, and his job was to figure out what the galaxy was going to do about humanity before the galaxy did it. What the galaxy was going to do, Cole realized very quickly, was split into 3 groups. The first group was afraid. These were mostly the mid-level species, powerful enough to have large fleets, but not powerful enough to feel secure. They saw humanity's railguns as a threat to the balance of power that had kept them safe for centuries. If shields no longer worked, then every military calculation in the galaxy changed overnight. Their fleets, their fortresses, their entire defense strategies were suddenly worth nothing. These species wanted humanity disarmed, and they were willing to push hard for it. The second group was opportunistic. These were the smaller species, the ones who had been bullied by the elder races, or raided by pirates, or simply ignored by the Concord's power structure for too long. They saw humanity as a potential ally, a new power that could change the old order. Within days of the battle, Earth's diplomatic channels were flooded with trade proposals, alliance offers, and requests for military cooperation. Species that had never spoken to a human before were suddenly very interested in being friends. The third group was the most dangerous. The elder races, led by the Veltari, were not afraid, and they were not looking for allies. For thousands of years, their dominance had rested on 2 things: their advanced technology and their control of the Concord's political structure. Humanity had just shown that one of those pillars, energy shield technology, had a critical weakness. If the other species began to realize that the elder races were not as untouchable as they seemed, the entire political order could collapse. Cole discovered the elder race's response 3 weeks after the Senate session, buried in encrypted communications that a friendly Uri intelligence officer helped him decode. The Velthari were organizing a quiet coalition. Not a military one, an economic one. They were pressuring mining companies and resource traders to cut off humanity's access to the rare minerals needed to manufacture railgun slugs. Tungsten, osmium, depleted uranium. Without these materials, human railguns were just expensive metal tubes. Cole sent his findings back to Earth on a priority channel. The response came from United Earth Naval Command within hours. It was a single directive, classified at the highest level. Project Longbow was being accelerated. Cole had heard rumors about Longbow, but the details were above his clearance level. What he did know was that Earth's weapons engineers were not satisfied with the current generation of railguns. They were building something bigger. Something that was not designed to kill ships. Something that was designed to kill fortresses. While the political storm raged in the Concord Senate, something unexpected happened on the other side of the galaxy. The Kareth hegemony, the most feared warrior species in known space, sent a message to Earth. The Kareth were insectoids, 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor made of their own chitin. They had 4 arms, compound eyes, and a society built entirely around warfare. Every Kareth was a soldier. Their history was a list of battles, and they had never lost a war. They were also the only species in the galaxy that the Veltari treated with genuine caution, because the Kareth did not care about politics, diplomacy, or the Concord's rules. They cared about strength. The message came directly from War Queen Skriveth the Undying, ruler of the hegemony for over 200 years. It was short. It was not diplomatic. It read, "We have watched your battle. Your weapons are interesting. We would learn of them. Name your price." The Kareth did not want to fight humanity. They wanted to fight with humanity. In their culture, recognizing another species' strength was the highest form of respect. And humanity had just done something no other species had managed. They had made the Kareth curious. Back on Earth, the political and military leadership met in closed session to discuss the galaxy's reaction. Some argued for caution, for diplomacy, for trying to calm the galaxy's fears. Others argued that caution would be seen as weakness, and that humanity needed to press its advantage while it had one. Admiral Kiera Valdez, newly promoted to Fleet Admiral after the Battle of Elysium IV, sat at the far end of the table and let the others talk. When they were done, she spoke. "The galaxy spent 40 years treating us like children," she said. "They laughed at our ships. They laughed at our weapons. They let pirates raid our colonies because they thought it did not matter. Now they have seen what we can do, and they are afraid. Good. Fear keeps people honest." She stood up and walked to the display screen showing the fleet projections. But fear alone is not enough. Fear makes people do stupid things. The Velthari are already trying to cut off our resources. The Thessians want us disarmed. If we sit here and wait, they will strangle us slowly. We need to show the galaxy that we are not just dangerous. We are necessary. She pulled up a star chart showing the Shattered Reach, the lawless region controlled by the Dracoon Ravagers. At its heart was Iron Heaven, the fortress that had defied the Concord for 8 centuries. The Dracoon have been the galaxy's open wound for 800 years. Every species has suffered from their raids. Every species has tried to stop them and failed. If we take Iron Heaven, we do not just win a battle. We solve a problem that the entire galaxy has given up on. And when we do that, we are not the barbarians with primitive weapons anymore. We are the ones who did what no one else could. The room was silent for a long moment. Then the Secretary General of the United Earth Government nodded. "Build your fleet, Admiral." Within a month, humanity began the largest military expansion in its history. 200 warships, every one carrying railguns, with the Mjolnir and Gungnir as the anchors of the formation. And somewhere in the deep shipyards of Earth's moon, behind security so tight that only 12 people in the entire government knew the details, Project Longbow moved toward completion. It was a siege railgun, a weapon designed not to kill ships, but to crack open worlds. The galaxy had spent 10,000 years building shields to stop energy. Humanity was about to show them what happened when you threw a building-sized piece of metal at those shields instead. Iron Heaven had stood for 800 years. It was not simply a space station. It was a fortress built into the heart of a dead moon, a structure so massive and so heavily defended that it had become a symbol. To the Dracun Ravagers, it was proof that they could never be defeated. To the Concorde, it was proof that some problems could not be solved. To the galaxy, it was a scar that everyone had learned to live with. The moon had been hollowed out over centuries, its interior turned into a city of metal and stone where 1,000,000 Dracun lived and planned their raids. Its surface was covered with weapon platforms, sensor arrays, and docking bays for thousands of warships. And surrounding it all were 12 layers of energy shields, each one powered by its own reactor, each one capable of absorbing enough plasma fire to melt a continent. The Concorde had sent fleets against Iron Heaven 3 times. 3 times they had failed. After the 3rd attempt, they stopped trying. Now, for the 4th time, a fleet was coming. But this time, humanity was part of it. The combined force gathered at a staging point, 2 systems away from the shattered reach. 500 Concorde ships from a dozen species, their hulls gleaming with energy arrays and shield generators. And beside them, looking rough and dark and heavy, 200 human warships of the combined arms fleet, led by Fleet Admiral Kiera Valdez aboard the Mjolnir. Overall command had been given to Veltari High Admiral Serath Cole. This was politics, not tactics. The Veltari had insisted, and Earth had agreed, because refusing would have fractured the coalition before it fired a shot. Valdez did not like it, but she understood it. She also understood that when the shooting started, politics would not matter. Physics would. The fleet jumped into the shattered reach on a cold morning by Earth Standard Time. What they found was exactly what intelligence had predicted. 2,000 Dracun warships arranged in defensive formations around Iron Heaven, and the fortress itself glowing behind its 12 shield layers like a poisonous eye. Serath Cole opened the battle with a standard Concorde assault pattern. His 500 ships advanced in a broad front, firing plasma lances and particle beams at the Dracun defensive line. It was textbook. It was elegant. It was exactly what the Dracun expected. The Ravager shields absorbed the energy fire and held. The Dracun counterattacked with their own plasma weapons, and the Concorde shields held too. The 2 fleets settled into the kind of grinding energy exchange that galactic warfare had always been. Ships traded fire. Shields flickered and recharged. Small vessels on both sides were destroyed in 1s and 2s. The Concorde fleet pushed forward slowly, losing ships at a rate that was acceptable by historical standards, but that made Valdez's jaw tighten every time she saw the numbers update. She requested permission to advance her fleet 4 times. 4 times, Serath Cole denied her. His reasons were tactical, he said. The human ships needed to be held in reserve. The timing was not right. The formation was not optimal. Valdez heard the real reason beneath the words. The Velthari admiral did not want humanity to be the hero of this battle. He wanted his fleet, his species, to be the ones who finally broke Iron Heaven. By hour 6, the Concorde vanguard was in trouble. The Dracun had reinforced their front line with fresh ships from Iron Heaven's docking bays, and the Concorde formation was beginning to buckle. 60 Concorde ships had been destroyed. The Ravager losses were half that. The energy exchange was grinding in the Dracun's favor, because their shields were fresher and their position was stronger. Commander Torres, standing beside Valdez on the Mjolnir's bridge, read the tactical display and said what everyone was thinking. If he does not let us in soon, there will not be a fleet left to support. Valdez opened a direct channel to Serath Cole. She did not request permission this time. Admiral Cole, your vanguard will collapse within the hour. You know this, I know this. Let my fleet through, or this mission fails and every ship we have lost today died for nothing. The channel was silent for 10 long seconds. Then Serath Cole's voice came through, quiet and controlled, and carrying the weight of a pride that was breaking. You are cleared to advance, Admiral Valdez. All channels, all frequencies. The humans are coming through. Valdez stood. All ships, hammer formation. Dreadnoughts forward. We are going straight through their line. Do not stop for anything. Our target is Iron Heaven. Everything else is in the way. The human fleet surged forward like a dark tide. 200 ships in a tight spear formation. The Mjolnir and Gungnir at the tip, their railguns already charged. They did not spread out to engage the Dracoon fleet ship by ship. They did not trade fire at long range. They drove straight into the heart of the enemy formation, like a knife through flesh. The Dracoon fired on them. Plasma bolts and particle beams hammered the human ships. But the human fleet did not carry energy shields. Instead, they carried something the galaxy had never seen on warships before. Kinetic armor. Layers of physical plating, dense composites of tungsten and ceramic, designed not to absorb energy, but to deflect and distribute physical and thermal force. The plasma hits scorched the armor, burned away outer layers, left glowing scars across the hulls. But the ships kept coming, and they fired back. 200 railgun salvos tore through the Dracoon ships that tried to block their path. At close range, the tungsten slugs hit so hard that ships did not just lose sections. They came apart completely, broken into fragments by the sheer force of impact. The human fleet cut a corridor of destruction through the Ravager formation, leaving a trail of shattered hulls and expanding debris clouds behind them. In 11 minutes, the Mjolnir reached firing range of Iron Heaven itself. The fortress filled the forward view screen, a scarred and ancient moon wrapped in 12 layers of shimmering energy shields. Those shields had stopped everything the galaxy had thrown at them for 8 centuries. Plasma lances, particle beams, nuclear warheads, antimatter charges. Nothing had ever reached the surface. Valdez looked at the fortress. She thought about the millions of people the Dracoon had enslaved over the centuries. She thought about the steadfast and the defiant, and their crews who died buying time at Elysium 4. She thought about every Concord admiral who had stood where she was standing, and decided it could not be done. Longbow, she said, fire. Deep in the Mjolnir's core, a weapon that only 12 people on Earth had known about until today, came to life. The siege railgun was not like the ship-to-ship weapons. It was the entire spine of the dreadnought, a single massive accelerator that ran the full length of the 2-kilometer ship. The slug it fired was 20 meters long and weighed as much as a small building. The capacitor banks drained so completely when it fired that every non-essential system on the Mjolnir went dark for 30 seconds. The slug accelerated to 15% of the speed of light. It hit the first shield layer and passed through it. It hit the second and passed through that too. The third, the fourth. The slug punched through all 12 layers of Iron Heaven's legendary shields in less than 1,000th of a second. It struck the surface of the moon and drove 6 kilometers into the interior before its fragmentation core detonated. The explosion was not nuclear, it was kinetic. The slug's remains, still carrying unimaginable energy, shattered into millions of fragments that tore through the fortress's internal structure, like a hurricane made of metal. 6 kilometers of tunnels, chambers, weapon systems, and infrastructure were destroyed in an instant. Iron Heaven shuddered. For the first time in 800 years, the fortress shook. The Gungnir fired next. Then the Mjolnir again, its capacitors barely recharged. Then the Gungnir once more. 4 siege rounds in total, each one driving deep into the moon and detonating inside. After the 4th shot, Iron Heaven cracked. Not metaphorically, the moon physically split along fault lines created by the impacts. Massive sections of the surface broke away and drifted into space. Atmosphere vented from 1,000 ruptures. The shield generators, their power systems destroyed from within, flickered and died one by one until all 12 layers went dark. The fortress that had never fallen was broken, not by fleets of thousands, not by weapons of incredible energy, by 4 pieces of metal thrown very, very hard. The Draken fleet watched their unbreakable home come apart, and they ran. 2,000 ships turned and fled into the void, scattering in every direction, the fight gone out of them completely. No one pursued. There was no need. On the bridge of his flagship, Velthari High Admiral Sereth Cole stood perfectly still and watched the debris field that had once been the most feared structure in the galaxy. His 4 eyes reflected the drifting fragments of a moon that had been whole an hour ago. His aides stood beside him, waiting for orders, waiting for some response. Sereth Cole did not give orders. He spoke quietly, almost to himself, in a voice that carried the weight of 6,000 years of civilization, confronting a truth it had been too proud to see. We should never have laughed. 1 year after the fall of Iron Heaven, the galaxy was a different place. Not because the stars had changed, or because borders had shifted, though both of those things had happened. It was different because the story the galaxy told about itself had changed. For 10,000 years, that story had been simple. The elder races led, the younger races followed, and power came from energy, elegance, and age. That story was dead now. A new one was being written, and humanity was holding the pen. The Shattered Reach, once a lawless expanse of pirate territory, was being reborn. Human engineers worked alongside species that had been Dracoon slaves for generations, building stations and settlements where there had only been raiding outposts. The Uri, the small aquatic people who had suffered more Dracoon raids than almost anyone, sent their best scientists to help terraform the region's habitable worlds. The Thessians, who had wanted humanity disarmed just a year ago, quietly sent construction ships and pretended they had always supported the operation. The freed slaves were the hardest part. Hundreds of thousands of beings from dozens of species had been held in Iron Heaven and its satellite camps. Many of them had been born in captivity. They had never known anything but service to the Dracoon. Human medical teams and counselors worked with them around the clock, and it was slow, painful work that would take years. But it was being done, and that mattered. Across the wider galaxy, the military implications of Iron Heaven's fall were impossible to ignore. Every species with a fleet was scrambling to adapt. Energy shields, the foundation of galactic defense for millennia, were no longer enough. The Concord Military Council issued new doctrine requiring all member fleets to develop hybrid defense systems combining energy shields with physical armor. Design teams from 100 species worked on the problem, but progress was slow. Building effective kinetic armor was not as simple as bolting metal plates to a ship. The materials science, the engineering, the understanding of how physical force behaved at relativistic speeds. Humanity had spent decades perfecting these things. Everyone else was starting from nothing. This meant that for the foreseeable future, humanity had a military advantage that no other species could match. Human railguns could kill any ship in the galaxy, and no one else's weapons could reliably kill a human ship protected by kinetic armor. It was not a comfortable situation for anyone, including humanity. Fleet Admiral Valdez made this point repeatedly in meetings with Earth's government. An advantage is not the same as safety, she told the United Earth Security Council. Right now, every species in the galaxy is either trying to catch up to us or trying to figure out how to bring us down. Both of those things are dangerous. We need allies, real ones, not species that fear us, but species that trust us. The most important alliance came from the least expected direction. The Kareth hegemony, the galaxy's most feared warrior species, formalized their relationship with Earth through a mutual defense pact called the Iron Compact. It was the first time in recorded history that the Kareth had signed a treaty with anyone. Their culture did not believe in diplomacy. They believed in strength, and they had decided that humanity had it. War Queen Skriveth the Undying traveled to Earth personally for the signing ceremony. She was enormous, even by Kareth's standards, 8 feet tall with chitin armor that had turned dark bronze with age. She had ruled the hegemony for over 200 years, survived 17 assassination attempts, and personally killed the last 3 challengers to her throne. She was not someone who was easily impressed. She stood before the United Earth Parliament in the Great Hall in Geneva, surrounded by human leaders and diplomats and military officers. And she spoke through a translator that rendered her clicking, grinding language into words that every human in the room would remember for the rest of their lives. "I have ruled the Kareth for 2 centuries, she said. "In that time, we have fought every species in this galaxy. We have broken empires. We have shattered worlds. We have faced enemies with weapons that could burn stars, and we did not hesitate. We do not know fear. It is not in our biology. It is not in our culture. We do not understand it." She paused and looked across the room with her compound eyes, taking in every face. "But we understand respect, and we will not fight the humans, not because we fear death. We welcome death. We live for the glory of battle and the honor of falling in combat. We will not fight the humans, because they have made death too fast to be glorious. Their weapons do not give you time to roar. They do not give you time to raise your blade. They do not give you time to know you are dying. One moment you exist, the next you do not. There is no honor in that kind of death. There is only physics." She turned to Valdez, who stood in the front row in her dress uniform. "So instead, we will fight beside you, and together we will make the galaxy a place where only the worthy survive." The hall was silent for a long moment. Then the applause began. The Veltari Dominion, meanwhile, was struggling. For the first time in 6,000 years, their position as the galaxy's leading power was genuinely threatened. Not by military force. Humanity had shown no interest in conquest, but by relevance. The younger species no longer looked to the Veltari for leadership. They looked to Earth. The Veltari's famous energy technology, once the gold standard of the galaxy, was now seen as incomplete at best and obsolete at worst. Within the Dominion, a generational divide was growing. Younger Veltari, many of whom had studied at human universities or served alongside human officers, pushed for modernization and genuine partnership. They argued that the future was cooperation, not competition. The old guard, led by admirals like Sereth Cole, resisted. They could not accept that a species younger than some Veltari buildings had fundamentally changed the rules of the galaxy. The tension was building towards something, but what it would become, no one could say yet. On Earth, the shipyards of the moon were busy day and night. The newest vessel to emerge from them was the UES Longbow, the first of a new class of super dreadnoughts. It was 3 kilometers long, carried 4 siege railguns, and was armored so heavily that its designers joked it could survive flying through a small star. It was the most powerful warship in the galaxy, and it was not alone. 3 more were under construction, with plans for 12 in total. Fleet Admiral Valdez stood on the Longbow's bridge as it completed its final construction trials in lunar orbit. The bridge was larger than the Mjolnir's, with wider viewports and more advanced displays, but it had the same feeling. Heavy, solid, built for purpose, not for beauty. It felt like a human ship. Captain Darius Cole, now Valdez's chief of staff, stood beside her. He had been with her since the early days, since the mockery at Concord Station Apex, since the desperate charge at Elysium 4. He had watched her become the most famous military officer in galactic history. And he had watched the galaxy reshape itself around the things she had done. "Do you think they will ever stop being afraid of us?" he asked, looking out at the stars. Valdez considered the question for a long time. She thought about the Veltari, who had called her weapons primitive. She thought about the Dracoon, who had enslaved millions because no one could stop them. She thought about the Kareth Queen, who had crossed the galaxy to shake her hand. She thought about the freed slaves in the Shattered Reach, who were learning to live again. Fear is what happens when you do not understand something, she said. Right now, the galaxy does not understand us. They see the railguns and the armor and the ships, and they think that is what we are. But that is not what we are. We are the people who jumped into a fight outnumbered 8-1 because there were farmers who needed help. We are the people who cracked open a fortress because slaves needed freeing. The weapons are just tools. What matters is why we use them. She turned to Cole. One day, they will understand that. They will understand our stubbornness and our courage and our need to protect what is ours. And on that day, they will not fear us anymore. She paused. They will fear what we fear, and we will face it together. Cole nodded slowly. He wanted to believe that. Looking at Valdez, he thought maybe he did. 3 weeks later, a deep space sensor array on the galaxy's outer rim detected something. It was not a ship. It was not a fleet. It was an energy signature so massive that the array's systems initially flagged it as a malfunction. But it was not a malfunction. Something was approaching from the void between galaxies, from the empty dark where no star had ever burned. Something impossibly large. Something that was not in any database, any archive, any record of any species in the Concorde's 10,000-year history. The array's artificial intelligence analyzed the signature for 7 minutes, running it against every known classification. When it was done, it attached a single tag to the data package before transmitting it to every military command in the galaxy. Unknown, extragalactic, hostile intent probable. The message reached Earth at 3 a.m, Geneva time. It reached the Velthari at noon. It reached the Kareth hegemony during a feast celebrating the Iron Compact. It reached every species, on every world, in every corner of the galaxy. And for one brief moment, every petty rivalry, every political grudge, every ancient grievance became completely and utterly meaningless. Something was coming. Something that did not care about energy shields or plasma lances or the politics of the Concorde Senate. But there was one thing in the galaxy that it had never encountered. One weapon it had no defense against. One species stubborn enough, brave enough, and reckless enough to stand in its path and refuse to move. Somewhere in lunar orbit, the UES Longbow's railguns hummed quietly in the dark, waiting for the order to fire. And on its bridge, Fleet Admiral Kiera Valdez read the sensor report, set down her coffee, and began planning for war. Humanity had started by throwing rocks. It had never stopped. And whatever was coming out of the void was about to learn what the rest of the galaxy had already discovered the hard way. You do not laugh at the species that throws rocks, because sooner or later they will build a rock big enough to break your world.